You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
Holy smokes, folks. I just interviewed one of the most amazing individuals on this show, and I'm excited for you to meet him. So we're about to have Scott Chopin on the show with Urban Pacific Development. So they're based out of California, and this is the most unique way that they have found to solve the affordable housing problem. And I'm not going to use the term affordable. I'm going to use the term attainable or workforce, because technically affordable is tax credit. He's not doing tax credit. He's actually found a profitable way to use private capital to actually solve the housing crisis in their location. So we're going to get right into that show, and I'm so excited to introduce Scott to you. You may even see Quattro and Scott partnering, Quattro and Urban Pacific partnering in the near future in some way, because I'm that excited about this. So let's get right into this show. Before we do, folks, pay it forward, like us, subscribe, leave us that 5-star review, thoughtful comment, whatever modality you're on, just interact with the show, because that's the only way we can get this out to more people just like you, and we so appreciate you for it. Folks, if you want to be on the show, check us out at thequattroway.com/podcast to apply. We'd love to have a conversation with you. It's how everyone gets on this show. And look, if you have any value to add, we want to have you here. We are on all the social platforms, so check us out on TikTok and YouTube at Real Estate Runway Podcast. All these links are in the show notes, by the way, for your clicking pleasure. And my entire team and Quattro Capital is on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. Wherever you'd like to interact, we'd love to interact with you. So without further ado, let's get right into the show. Here we go. All right. Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. This is your captain speaking. We are joined today by Scott Chopin here with Urban Pacific. These guys are developers in the affordable housing space. I'm really excited for this conversation we're about to have. Scott, welcome to the show. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, great, Chad. Doing well and happy to be here. Appreciate it.
As we usually do on the show, I want to learn about you first, Scott. Tell me about your journey in real estate, how you got into Urban Pacific, and this current venture that is, it sounds like affordable housing is really the mission on your mind. So walk us through who you are as a person, Scott, and then we'll get into some meat today.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, I'm very fortunate. I had a family background in real estate development. It's not a career choice that most people like find the library book at the library. You want to be a developer, like not a mainstream career choice. So I had the family background. My dad and my uncle were both in the business. And so grew up around it. Didn't necessarily think that was going to be a career choice for me initially. I hadn't identified like the meaningful part of like, why would you do this? What's exciting about it? And so I left high school and actually worked in the electrical trades for a handful of years.
Oh, really?
Actually working on new construction apartment buildings, funny enough. So I got that great crash course and construction background. Also informed me what I didn't want to do for the rest of my career, which is work electrical work. Good career, but that wasn't my thing. So at 18 or 19 years old, when I was working in the trades, I'm a pretty heavy reader, maybe less so than I was then today. But I read one of those old 50s era books, How to Make $1 Million Investing in Real Estate on the Weekends, one of those famous books that we've all seen.
Oh, yeah.
And I read this one book, and reading that book taught me deal making. It was very basic, 50s era, not real sophisticated, but that sort of turned the light bulb on me. I go, oh, okay, now you need developers build new buildings, but like why? What's the motivation to it? And so the deal making, simplistically buy low, sell high, buy an empty piece of ground, build a building and make it more value. I even think of development as the ultimate form of value add. So that basically, like when those two things came together, background in real estate development, finally with the understanding of deal making, it said, hey, I got to work professionally in the development business, got to get a college degree, went to work for some companies for several years, learning the business. And then in 2000, I left to form what is now the Urban Pacific Group of companies and have been basically focused on ground up apartment development now for 23 years. Actually, this past March was our 23rd year of operations. And then just a little bit about me. I'm based in Long Beach, California, my hometown, a third generation. My kids are fourth generation. My wife and I will celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary in October of this year. And we have 3 kids, 22, 20, and 16, two in college and 1 finishing high school, getting ready for college.
So you're about to have them all off the payroll. It sounds like you're pretty close.
I wish it were that somebody I know said, when your kids finally graduate college, you'll notice your bank account balance will start to go up. We got one, our oldest will graduate next year. So we at least will have the great fortune of not having three in college all at the same time. So I'm feeling fortunate that way, but I'm blessed. My family is my primary motivator. As I say to people, my family, my wife, my marriage, and my kids is the best thing I've ever accomplished.
I love that. I love that, Scott. And so you hit something that stuck with me there. 50s era, how to make money on the weekends in real estate book, and it taught you deal making. Would there be any sort of lesson from that time? You said it was simple, so fair.
Mhm.
Would there be any kind of lesson that maybe stuck with you from that book that you still use today?
Yeah, I think that's why I say buy low, sell high. That sounds so like pedestrian. Yeah, of course. But it really was meaningful to me because it taught me like why somebody does a project or puts together a deal. What's the motivating factor for it? Like, why do you care enough about it to do the work? And then even at that point in time, I had no clue what a working developer did and the sort of risk that any investor or developer takes. So that was like later, but just really the idea of like, you could create value, maybe to put it in a more simplistic way, like doing this, you could create value. You could create value for investors. You could create value for people that rent your units. You create value for yourself so you can take care of your family. So it's that value creation. And then I'll add, I basically grew up playing music, just informally, nothing formal, playing guitar, and was in several bands. And that was going to be my career choice for a couple of years. And then I got smart and didn't do that. But I wrote a lot of music just as something fun to do. And what came out of that also was the creativity and deal making and development of designing projects, of finding and underwrite deals. That's my favorite part of what to do, is like looking at all the pieces of a deal and putting them together in a way that creates value, hopefully uniquely and fun and exciting and good for the team to work on. So it's value creation plus creativity, maybe for shorthand.
I love that. Scott, what you don't see is on this wall over here to my right, there are about 4 guitars hanging there. So you can, hit home.
You got to get him in the camera shot.
I should.
Get him on that wall behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Back there by the logo. You said something that resonated with me though, Scott. So you said, in my opinion, the development is really the ultimate value add. And that stuck with me there. And I think we may talk about that, but I've heard, think about value add, folks, as just adding value to a project. You're maybe even redeveloping something, but and that could be as little as cosmetic upgrades to down to the studs and rebuilding it. But I've heard the term super value add from, let's say you buy a value add project, but maybe you can add 60 more units to it or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like what we call a super value add. I love what you just said, an ultimate value add, because that's really what it is. And when you think about it, some of the largest basis jumps are just in raw land alone. When you take a raw piece of land and get it entitled and ready to build something, then of course you go build the project, and that's the most incredible value add potential there. So that really,
I think a lot of people, they're like, if you're in investment and thinking about the move into development, it's daunting, right? Like I talked to a lot of people, and we'll talk later about the methodology to think about that. But you put it well, it's like on a spectrum, right? Light value add, a little heavier. What was the one you called super value add, and then ultimate value add? The process is the same, and it's still the same underwriting of apartments, underwriting of apartment market, of the deal, of the value when you complete. Are you making money? Are you creating enough value to produce a profit surplus above your cost basis? Like when people think about it, I just tell them, think about development the same way you do as value add. Now you've got a little bit of stuff in there like architect and ground up construction and a little bit of different methodologies, how the deals go through their life cycle of like one deal has existing tenants with cash flow, value add, and development as a raw piece of dirt with no cash flow. So that's one of the fundamental differences. But I think people really like when they learn development, you sort of go, oh, really, it is not much more. It's a heavier version of that, or value as a lighter version of development. But the fundamental process of deal making. So back to this deal making plus creativity and value addition. It's very fundamental in all types of real estate, all types of projects within each food group.
I love that, Scott. And before we pivot over to some of the mission of Urban Pacific right now, we do have about half people on the show here who are LP investors. They're looking for different places to put money, different risk versus reward scenarios, different payout structures. For that portion of the audience, let's talk about for a second, how would I compare and contrast your general, we'll say, stable apartment community that's already built and cash flowing, maybe with some slight value add versus a ground up build? Like, what is that experience going to look like to an LP investor?
Yeah. So the way I think of this, like I call it, it's not a very great name. I call it the 3-bucket method of thinking of value add and development and how they overlap. And bucket one is what we all know how to do. So when you find a deal, you got to underwrite the apartment market. You got to look at the unit mix. You got to assess the units comparable to the other rental product in the marketplace. What's the depth of demand? What depths of supply? What are my rental rates, operating expenses, all the normal underwriting. That's the same for value add and development. So that's bucket number one, and both do that. Bucket number two is really the development bucket. And that's where you go, okay, I got the raw land. I got to hire an architect. I got to create from whole cloth the unit mix. This is one of the differences in development is I don't inherit a mix of 1 and 2 and 3 bedrooms on a project in Tennessee. I'm going to create brand new. And it's part of my job to figure out that part of the market where maybe there's a gap. I can design new units to fulfill a gap that is not otherwise fulfilled in the marketplace. And then you got construction, actual heavy construction, at least in comparison to value add, and then full empty building lease up. That's daunting to some investors because part of the reaction I get when I talk to people, I even ask them, like, well, how much development have you done relative to value add? Talk about historically. I'm careful with people who haven't done development because really fundamentally, it's like you might have 2 or 3 years where you have no cash flow. Now, it's the capital stack is accommodating all the costs to build it, to get it through final lease up, right? And so self-contained, you put in the equity, you put in the debt. And so there should be no money in a well-structured project, no more capital calls from the LP, and we finish it, we lease it up, and then we go to the perm loan. So that's bucket number 2, which is like the development, design, construction, lease up from empty bucket. And then the third bucket is, again, what both do, which is what's the value production in the project? Value add, you're going to rehab the units, increase the rents, increase NOI, compete better in the marketplace and increase value. And it's the same for development, except we're building brand new empty units. And hopefully we did our jobs correctly and we're fitting a part of the market and we got good demand. And then we still are underwriting with NOI and cap rates. What's our return on costs? People are looking at it that way. So that's where I say the bucket 1 and 3 are exactly the same. There's no difference between the way you underwrite a valuation of an apartment building versus a new construction apartment building. It's still an apartment building, right? You still got an income producing asset. It's just that middle bucket. And by the way, the buckets are in order. You underwrite the deal, right? And then you build the deal, and then you sell or refi into a perm loan. So the thought process is to go in the order of the deal.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And investors, if you heard that, it's just a timing difference, right? Virtually every value add project, whether we're regular value add, super, or ultimate, as we talked about earlier, they're all different versions of cash flow versus controlled burn rate on cash, right? Because it's like you're all spending more money. Like when you're doing any kind of construction on a deal, you're spending more money than it's making. It's an intentional capital investment. And so the difference is you're building something new. There's no renters there. There's no income stream.
Your burn rate is 100% and your interest reserve is bigger, comparable to your bridge loan on your value add deal. I think people, they just look at the lease units. There's a certain amount of comfort people get from that. They go, oh, I got those. They're occupied. And then they look at a development deal and they're like, there's nothing. It's zero. It's empty. And I get it. I make no claim to thinking that all philosophies are valid. In other words, the value add approach to it and the development approach to it. It's just functionally which is more powerful, right? Powerful produces profit, does well for the investors and the developer. And by the way, there are times to do value add and there are times to do development. And I'm really been for my entire career, 30 plus years at this point, have always been a developer. And I wouldn't advise necessarily people do what I do. In fact, we're always working on building a certain amount of multifamily assets for like our own account for the company and for me personally. Being a developer is hard, right? I won't mince any words. And there is a certain comfort as I look back on my career, and plus people, the sort of equity multiples. And I'll give you an example. So I was on Twitter today. I'm going back and forth with another guy in LA.
No. X.com, Scott, no longer Twitter, right?
I know. What's Twitter? What is that? And he was saying, he goes, oh, we were used to 50 to 100% cash out refi on a new construction building at perm. And now we're underwriting that you probably are putting more equity in at the perm loan, right? Because the perm loan's underwriting lower than the construction loan. But my point is, I love to read those stories in the value add space where like somebody's, oh yeah, dude, I bought it in 2017 and I refied it in 2019. I got all my money back. And then I'm at infinite returns because I was able to, return all the original investment. That doesn't happen in development. It can. I'm not saying it never does, but particularly for us in California, we're such a high cost basis market, like land and construction, high rents too, high values, but it's always, we're working our tails off to we're sweating every dollar, every bullet.
Yeah, and it's no different in the value add space, folks. It's just there's a bigger basis difference, I think, between where you acquire the project and where you ultimately refi or sell it. There's also a lot more capital that goes with that. So it's like they're one for, not quite one for one, but we have the same problems in both sides.
Yeah. So I would real quick, I would only offer that in value add if you buy right, if you can buy at a deep enough discount, whether it's distressed or just a great purchase, that's less available in the construction development space. You can buy land at a deep discount. That's great. You can never buy construction at a 30% below replacement cost, or your financing and your interest costs and your soft costs and city fees and all that kind of stuff. None of that you can buy at a discount. So that's where I see value add as more powerful, that if you are disciplined in your deal acquisition and do well in off market, like you can really produce. And that's why they can produce those sort of all cash out more regularly, at least in my experience. That's something that's an unusual difference as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And to be fair, the returns are typically a little higher in new development simply because you're taking a bigger risk, but it's bigger basis. So yeah, it is. You're probably talking 15 to 20 IRR on a good day in value add, and probably 25, 23 to 30 in construction.
Yeah, I would say in this environment, higher interest, it's like probably
it's all down right now.
High teens. We're not seeing a lot of 30s these days, and we have seen them, but it's getting tamped down a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Those interest rates on the perm loans and construction debts.
Yeah. And that's a fair segue because I was going to pivot over to your affordable housing mission of what you're building there right now. But just give me your thoughts on that. I'm a student of the economy. You and I were bantering before this, that you are as well. I have my opinions on where we are, where we're going. What goes up must come down, some say, and vice versa. Where do you think we are? What do you think the next couple of years look like from a debt markets and inflation and all the buzzwords we've been hearing on the news lately?
Yeah, post 2008, I didn't pay good enough attention in that 2003 to 2007 era. So when 2008 came and we were partially prepared, not fully, it really brought it home for me. Like you really got to pay attention to this economic cycle stuff. You knew it intuitively, but then you're looking at it every day, making assessments. And we're in a business where the timelines of projects are counted in years, not days, weeks, or months. Development even longer, right, than value add. So what that has me do is have a regular assessment of economic cycle characteristics, and it's an ever evolving set of trusted sources of economic information. And when I say trusted, I go avoid all the guys who sell gold and the world's going to end tomorrow. That would be a good example of somebody with an agenda. Mainstream media, business media, and economic media, terrible. They're selling ads, right? They're not trying to educate you. So predominantly default to people who write in the blog space, YouTube channels. Twitter, X has become like really my go-to source for a lot of real-time, actual people information feeding into a domain of shared information that we can all see. So look, I think interest rates went up, damaged a lot of banks. This is all obvious. Now what we're starting to see, in fact, Twitter's educated me over the last couple of weeks, starting to see a lot of lenders. They were already pulling back. Your Silicon Valley Bank, we actually had a relationship with First Republic Bank that got squished. People sad to see it happen. But now we're starting to see lenders who were traditionally in the real estate space completely exit the real estate space. And I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but like household name brands, you go, oh yeah, I know those guys as a classic real estate lender. And I think we're talking mostly perm debt in the way that I'm reading this, or just we're not even in the real estate market at all, like zero, like where they were traditionally. So there's that. Will that return? Yes. Because fundamentally to me, the multifamily space on a go-forward basis is a go-to space for people in the United States economy. And it's not a great story, but the reality is, given inflation, given the way our debt structures are for the US government, look, we just got downgraded by, was it Moody's or Fitch's or whoever. The US government got downgraded, right? And we have some sort of a reckoning coming. And I'm not a fatalist. I'm like the most optimistic guy you got to be in this business, particularly a developer. But I think there's going to be some radical changes coming forward. I think it seems like the Fed should probably stop raising, but they're a little crazy right now. I can't assess. And plus, I don't trust their stats. That Powell says inflation is X, but they eliminate housing and energy costs from the core CPI. Like, what the hell, man? No one's not buying energy and no one's not paying for housing. So that's bad data. So this is where it comes down to, and you probably do the same, is like, I have to look past the sort of the regular sources and really look for what I call a signal from the noise. In fact, I have a Substack newsletter called The Real Signal. And my whole purpose of writing is combining real estate with macro. So this is my own reading I just share with people, and to try to look through all the noise and find out what's the real thing I should be paying attention to: the demographics, the culture, the economics, the politics, the technology. Those are all the 5 food groups of things that you would pay attention to at a fundamental basis. And what do I need to be paying attention to? I don't have an opinion on what I should be paying attention to because it's always changing. But look, this is what I love about being in the housing business. Fundamentally, human beings always need shelter. That will never go away. The style of shelter will change. Is it this style or that style? And maybe in the future, we're all living in pods or some crazy stuff. But on a go-forward basis,
3D printed units, that's coming.
Yeah. But I think on the go-forward basis, there's a fundamental shift away from ownership to renting. And that's probably where I say I wouldn't prefer it. I'm a rental guy, but I also say, look, if people have their choice, they'd own their own home, like the American dream, white picket fence, backyard, front yard, that kind of thing. But the economic realities don't produce that result for people in a normal working situation, right? So housing's high cost, wages are stagnant. Things like AI and other technology are starting to disrupt like the employment markets. That's coming. So I think people will start to move into the rental space or will stay there on a broader basis, nationally and regionally and locally. And so like you, I want to be in that space. And then we'll talk more about our specific type of housing. But now we're oriented about how can we serve these people best? What kind of housing could we produce that actually serves the type of lifestyle that they'd like to have for their families and can do it in a way that works with their economic situation. So when I talk about the capability to design projects that can fulfill, certain gaps in the market, or also tenant needs and or economic needs. So we're really steeped deeply in that sort of macro plus real estate combination, because that's where our projects are. And that's how we, put our deals together.
Yeah, Scott, you're absolutely right. And there's a couple things that aren't changing. One, food, water, shelter. Those are 3 human basic needs. Shelter's not going away. So I'm with you. I'm bullish on rental housing, whatever form it takes. We're calling things build to rent now, which are just single family communities built to rent. You've got garden style, all the different stuff we have. To Scott's point, we might be living in pods or 3D printed little triangles or something in the near future. They're doing that now. Google it if you don't believe me.
Yeah.
Or modular. There's companies like S2A Modular that are doing some cool stuff there. But in general, the stats are we still have a fundamental supply and demand imbalance in housing and will for a time to come. Now, we're about 1 million rental units short and closing fast. So I think we're gonna get that taken care of. Mm-hmm. But we're still like over 3 million homes short, which means there's still pressure on the rental industry. And
that's right.
To your point, I don't know that the American dream is the same anymore, Scott. For you and me, it was home ownership. But I think what I'm seeing in the millennial generation and now even in the baby boomer generation that is exiting the workforce, lock, key, and leave it lifestyle. People are just wanting that, which is why those build to rent buildings are doing so well, because you get the white picket fence, but you get to have the lock and key and leave it mindset. Yeah. It's a rental.
Somebody else gets to do the maintenance on it. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Yeah. And I agree with you on the banking system that we've started to break glass. I'd like to think we're getting close to the top on the interest raising. And if we don't, there's going to be a reckoning. The question is, what's the reckoning going to be? Is it going to be that we lose face internationally with our currency, which I know we're fighting that battle internationally, or that we choose to break our own banking system, which is going to have a ripple effect like 2008, like you wouldn't believe. So I think what we have to do as investors, folks, we just have to get ready that the next 5 years are probably going to be interesting. We're going to make some history. I wouldn't be doing short-term debt or investing in that right now. I think that's a scary thing to be doing. And if you did it short-term debt in the recent past, you're already feeling pressure. So there's some challenge there, but this is a perfect segue because we were just talking about your hyper niche in housing, which is the affordable side, and everything we just said. The economics are not really permitting homeownership, and further, anyone like me who's doing value add units, it's getting tougher and tougher to keep the rental price down, which where it needs to be in the affordable world. And so what's happening is you have this growing gap of a certain range or price range of housing that is just starting to cease to exist, which is really where people like Scott, it's taken some creative moves to still be able to provide that. So I'd love to pivot to that and hear from you. Yeah. How is your company solving that noble cause that is near and dear to our hearts and many people listening here today?
This episode is brought to you by Agora's investment management solution. Are you a GP or syndicator still using spreadsheets or an outdated investment management platform? Advance to Agora, the next step in investment management evolution. Agora's customers raise capital 40% faster and reduce operational expenses by 25%. With Agora, you can collect commitments faster, raise more capital by creating beautifully designed data rooms, public brochures, and automated subscription flows. Manage all your investor relationships efficiently with the most advanced investor CRM on the market. Delight your investors with a beautifully designed investor portal, which is fully customized to fit your brand and integrates seamlessly into your website. Distribute payments in a click directly from the platform and automatically generate and send all the reports and statements your investors need. Agora is suited for all types and all sizes of GPs or syndicators, starting with an affordable $5.99 a month subscription plan. Click the link in the description to book a live demo and learn what Agora can do for your business. Agora, better investment management.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have a background in affordable housing. So prior to starting the company, I worked for several years for a company that built tax credit affordable housing projects. And so in 2017, we had finished a slate of projects like sort of straight ahead, podium, mid-rise, dense product in California, studios ones and twos. And in 2017, we had a little flat spot in the market, equity pulled back, debt pulled back a little bit, just minor compared to what we're experiencing now. And that gave me the opportunity to think about, look around. We weren't going to bring a whole new slate of those kind of projects that we've done previously because the market had shifted or plateaued or whatever it did, flat spot. And so it really threw us into this conversation internally. What could we be doing that's differentiated? What could we be doing that nobody else is doing? So think contrarian, think exploiting niches. And we sort of get on this idea of doing like a family type of rental housing. And it really started from a specific project that we developed in our hometown of Long Beach. I won't go into great detail, but this project had an interesting dichotomy. It was limited on the unit count that we could do, but the size of the units was really totally up to us. And so because we couldn't do any more units, I told the architect, I go, okay, I'll make the units big. If we're going to rent these things, then let's not do a 2-bedroom. Let's do it like a 3-bedroom, right? Like, how about a 4-bedroom? And so we riffed on that a little bit. We ended up doing a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2-story townhouse with a garage, right? Some people might think of like a condo type unit or attached. These were attached units. And so we did that project as a total like flyer. We bought the land really well. And so go, okay, let's try this thing out. We don't have any idea how these units will rent. I had an inkling from my background in affordable housing that families needed this larger bedroom count housing. And I got to tell you, Chad, that project was a total home run. In fact, funny story, we underwrote the 4 bedrooms at $2,650, and that made the deal work. We did well. It was good for the market. And then we sold it, and the new buyer didn't want our tenants. They wanted it empty. They said, just sell it to us empty. You don't have to rent it. We'll pay you cash. And we're like, great, this is great. We'll do that. They turned around the next day and put the units on the market at $3,250.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, I called my partner on the deal. We did the deal together. And I was like, dude, what did we miss? What did we miss? And he's, man, they're not going to get the rents. And they got some at $3,250 and some others at $2,950, but well above our pro forma, like way above. And so that sort of little set of events, plus a couple other things, really got us on this idea of maybe there's a market for family style housing in like suburban, urban neighborhoods, not like downtown, but 3 or 4 neighborhoods away. And so What all that morphed into is now what we call the Urban Townhouse product, or UTH for short. And what that has evolved into is a townhouse attached build to rent product where each unit has 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 3-story townhouse, 2-car private garage, laundry room, market finishes. But basically what we're doing is we're serving a unit that houses multi-generational families very nicely, right? So if you're a Hispanic family, or you're Asian or Indian, where cultures are more predominantly living multi-generationally, and you have a family of 6, think grandparents, parents, adult kids, or young children, either the parents or the adult kids, and you have 6 or 8 people living together, and you practice what we call economic sharing. Like, people who live in this multi-generational environment, they do it for culture, right, for family around them, but they also do it for economic purposes, which is, hey, it's much better if we're sharing all our incomes to pay for housing and pay for food, and you do it together.
That makes a lot of sense.
Efficiencies, right? And so what we ultimately came up with is this unit type that served that family type or people that practice economic sharing. By the way, we all know this. When you were a roommate in college, you were practicing economic sharing. That was a way to keep your bedroom costs down, you share utilities, all that kind of things. So we do this commonly and historically. We're just doing it now in a way where we're basically delivering these brand new units into these urbanized suburban environments in Los Angeles, Orange County, SoCal, where families have never had the opportunity to rent a unit like this that's brand new. Having a 2-car garage in your apartment unit, like, that's unheard of, right? I never had a 2-car garage in any apartment I ever lived in. So these people go, oh, I get my own garage and
not included, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so we basically, after doing a couple of these, the first projects were called the experimental phase, because we needed to prove 3 things. We needed to prove it, we could rent it for what we thought, that we could build it for what we projected, and most importantly, that the valuation produced a profitable, viable project, right? Again, parts of this 3-bucket method we talked about before. And we really figured out that we have a basically incredible niche. Now, the problem with niche is that either there's really a story there for demand, or the other one goes, okay, no one's doing it because there is no demand. And we did a study about probably 2 years ago where we basically hired a market analyst. And we said, how much demand in Southern California would be for projects in the population of 5-bedroom units? Like, go out and assess how much unit demand there is. And basically they came back and came up with a number of 47,000 units of demand for this 5-bedroom unit type that we do across the 4 counties that make Los Angeles Metro. And we're lucky if we do 100,000 units a year in the state of California overall, right? Much less in Southern California. I can't think of the numbers. It's probably 40, 50,000, maybe a little bit more. The bottom line, I'll end here. The runway of demand is almost infinite, not quite, but multi-decade. We're classically a supply constraint state. We're the most supply constraint state because we're the most heavily regulated, et cetera, et cetera. So the story of workforce housing of this type, UTH, paired with private capital, we don't use government subsidy, is what makes up the heart of the UTH programs. Putting private capital, OZ capital, we do that. With this workforce housing model, no restrictions from a government sanctioned affordable housing. So we actually call it workforce housing, just to differentiate it from true affordable, where it's got government subsidy. So we have now in place, we have 1 private equity fund. We're in the process of putting together a second equity fund. And then we're in the process right now of raising OZ capital, both on specific projects. And then eventually that will morph into an actual OZ fund in the sense of the pool capital type structure like you would be used to on a fund.
Yeah, so you're merging a couple of things together if I'm hearing this. So I love we have economies of scale in this industry, but you're with the expense sharing world and going with bigger units, that seems to have really solved the problem for you. Mm-hmm. And so you're pound for pound, maybe you're getting a little bit better cost per unit or cost per square foot rather by having bigger units with you still have kitchens, bathrooms and all that, but there's more shared spaces. So it's almost like building a quad or something like that
That's
you
right.
would have in student housing. And I'm curious, you don't use government subsidies, you're using OZ capital, so you're getting some opportunity zone benefit on the taxation side. How in the world do the numbers work here? Because and I'm morbidly curious, asking for my own benefit selfishly, because like it's the greatest thing here. If you can figure out how to build something efficient enough using private capital and be able to rent it for a profit, that's where most, and I'll follow suit and not use the term affordable, because if it's not truly tax credit, it's not affordable.
Yeah. Some people
But-
call it big A affordable and little A affordable.
Right, exactly. So we can use the word attainable or workforce
Yeah, I
housing
call
or
it
something like
workforce,
that. Yeah, that's good. That's the biggest problem is people, there's no shortage of guys who want to build stuff like this and want to support this mission, but you can't make the pro forma work. And so what are the key ingredients there? Is it the unit size and the pound for pound like I discussed, or how does that work?
As all answers, it's a combination of things. Just to clarify, so we're moving into OZ Capital. So that's a new space for us. We've always liked the program, but we needed to see it mature. And frankly,
so you've done this with private equity.
We've done standard private equity. We now have the fund, but we've high net worth, family offices, syndications, all the food groups that we're all used to as to how to raise equity. But to answer your question, so really it's several things that make these profitable. So first is the unit type, right? So some people have called it a macro unit, like not a micro unit. It's the opposite of big unit, right? But really, you touched on it. We're building a big unit, 5 bedrooms, but we only do 1 kitchen, right? We do 4 bathrooms. So that's actually a sort of differentiator itself. If you got a big family, 4 bathrooms, you'll know that's important. But what it does do, how to describe it? The way I think of UTH is if you think you got 2 graphs crossing. So you got a graph of cost per square foot, and you got a graph of revenue per square foot. And what we are is that we're at the equilibrium point where we're basically maximizing the revenue as a function of cost. Now, every project does that, so that's nothing new, but the mix of how we do it is the important part, right? So the example I use is the spectrum. If you went down in density and you built single family houses to rent, right? Really easy to build, simple, cheap, low cost, except your revenue is low cost too, because you only got 1 house and so much to rent. You go the other end of the spectrum, you go like your super high rise, super sexy downtown LA kind of product, really high density, high per square foot revenue, right? You're generating a lot, except it costs you a lot of money to build that sucker, man. You got to expensive land, and all. High rise, right? And so you go, where's the middle point there? Where's the equilibrium point? So that's for us. In fact, we're very specific. We build a 3-story product only because it can shrink the footprint, get a little more density. If we went to a 4th story in California, we're now doing like higher level of sprinklers, more robust electrical systems, more exiting, right? More stairwells, that kind of thing. So it becomes inefficient. You go down a story, you're losing revenue. So we figured out through a little bit of experimentation that this 3-story model works that way. Okay, so there's that. But then about the unit itself, the way we look at it is we don't even necessarily really concentrate too much on a per square foot revenue factor, like all apartment developers. Oh, what's your per square foot rent? Comparing project to project and that kind of thing. Not that we don't care about that, but what we're doing is we're looking at the whole dollar rent for that unit. So our units basically right now are probably averaging between $3,800 to $4,200 a month for a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom unit, around 1,700 square feet. So whatever the math is, $250 a square foot. I think of my last pro forma I looked at.
Yeah, what I was getting to is about $760 a bedroom is what I was thinking about.
So you went right to it. So that's a factor is we're doing the per bedroom comparison. So you're like $4,000 or $800 a month for a bedroom, right? If you go to rent any 1 bedroom in California that's new, think comparable, new, not a terrible location, not a beat up building, not old, that kind of thing, you're at least probably $1,500 to $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. Yes, it's an apartment, it's got its own kitchen, that kind of thing. Well, look, if you're a single renter, let's say you're the child, let's say you're the grandparent of a family, right? You can either rent your own 1-bedroom, be on your own, have all those costs, or you share with this 1-bedroom, you cut your costs down by 60% maybe, or 50%.
Yeah.
Okay, so then a couple other factors. So we got this sort of the mode and model of the unit, the rent production, and this cost and revenue balance we got here. But then also the neighborhoods we build in are what we call urbanized suburban neighborhoods. So it's not central business district downtown. It's 3 or 4 neighborhoods out, and it would be a classically suburban neighborhood that's grown up a little bit. It's older, houses are older. There's probably more apartments. There's more commercial, that kind of stuff. It's not classically, truly suburban anymore. And that's also where families that rent our units, they default to those neighborhoods because that's where the housing is generally least expensive and appropriate for their lifestyle, right? It's not a war zone. The schools are decent. You can go to the store and feel like you got relative safety. So this sort of middle space between hardcore urban and true suburban. So
that affects your cost of land as well, right?
yes. So
There
less
you go.
competition for land. We have, in many cases, easier zoning process because it's not the new city with the greenfield development and all the NIMBYs are going crazy. And we're in California, so we always have NIMBYs. But if you go to some of these neighborhoods, they're like, yeah, cool. We could use apartments, that kind of thing. So there's that. Let's see what else. The style of build. We do the same unit relatively over and over again. I think production, home building style, construction methodologies, right?
Yeah.
Same subs, same designers, different cities, that kind of thing. But we have standard, like 2 or 3 standard 5-bedroom units. And in fact, most of our projects are only 5 bedrooms. Occasionally we do a 3 or 4 if we need to fit a little extra unit here and there. And then we're starting to experiment with doing accessory dwelling units, just fitting them in the site plan of how we do it. And so all those combination of things all come together to make this feasible. And then I'll end with this, is that one of the things we enjoy about these families is that we ethically, I'm a Christian, I'm like family oriented. I want to help families. So that ethically gives me great meaning. But in reality, we're basically serving families in a situation where they don't have other housing options. And so we're competing in a space that's uncontested. We're in a niche and a proven niche now. That's why we did the experimental phase. So not only is there like an ethical value to it, but there's also pragmatic. We got to produce yield, right? If we don't produce yield, we don't raise capital. If we don't raise capital, we don't house families. So the pure economic, mathematical, mechanical system still works, right? We still got to produce a profit, not that kind of thing. And the last part is these families, we're serving them. But here's the great thing, because they practice economic sharing and who they are, they're incredibly resilient in a recessionary environment. They're very entrepreneurial because they have multiple earners in the household. If somebody gets laid off, they've got 3 or 4 other people to pick up the slack in paying the rent. And because the family space is so important for them, they will circle the wagons and battle like all get out to stay in the unit, pay their rent, maintain their family lifestyle. That's such a central core part of who they are, of like how they identify themselves as a family, that screwing up the rental situation by not paying rent and getting evicted is not part of their ethic. Plus, the other thing is there aren't 5-bedroom apartments to go to the next project over.
Yeah, you can't replace that.
Concession and a TV and they don't exist. In fact, usually the only units that exist like that are our other projects that we build on surrounding neighborhoods. So this recession resilience is a real key part of both our own comfort, having good product to build and viable product, but also serving the tenants. They're resilient. And then also the investors, right? Long-term hold. Your issue is, can tenants stay? Will they stay? Will they remain paying their rent? Are they productive, viable tenants that continue on a long-term occupancy? And that's the best case scenario for investors on a long-term hold structure, which is what we're into.
Yeah, Scott, this is an incredible solution. I would call it a niche, but I think I'd more call it a unique solution to the problem. And folks, you heard him talking about it. It's really coming down to an intersection of cost versus revenue and having the most optimized version of that. And really it's getting down to a per bedroom cost that makes sense. But listen to how he beefed up in what some would call a questionable resident base from a tenant resiliency perspective. He's found a way to target the ones who are very much family units and trying to help each other and all that kind of stuff. And it makes the business plan more resilient. And he's right. If you're not using tax credits, these things have to make money. And so you have to figure out how to keep the capital flowing so you can actually, you have to generate a profit in order to help people so that you can pay it forward. So Scott, I could talk about this all day, brother. Thank you for coming on the show. I've got to land the plane. We're going to end with 4 questions. Are you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. First one, what is your superpower and how does it benefit you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think
more, just wait.
Yeah, no, I got it right. That's just the first one. I would say back to that creativity thing we talked about earlier. I always tell my team, I go, you got to tell me about problems, because people sometimes are shy to tell the truth that, hey, we got this problem. But I tell them, I'm a great problem solver, but I cannot solve problems I don't know about. And so I basically, give me a sort of like a problem to solve. I usually tell me, give me a few days. And then I wander around and take showers and do my walks to let my brain process. And usually, invariably, I'll come up with some I would call it unique solution. There's other people that do this, so it's not unprecedented, but that's what I love to do, and probably one of the things I'm strongest at.
I think we have proof there, given the whole business plan we just spoke about. It's a unique solution to a hard problem. So kudos there.
Thank you.
Let's flip over the coin, Scott. What's your biggest failure in life or business, and what'd you learn from it?
Yeah, because of my personality type, which is self-selected, people who are in the development business and real estate generally, I'm sometimes too optimistic. Now that I'm not meaning that as like a humble brag. I feel, and I've gotten much more conservative over the years. You touch the hot stove and don't do that. So we learn those lessons. And I need to be an eternal optimist to sustain in this business. But I think more and more, I'm thinking, look, really, I need to curb some of those more aggressive tendencies of, hey, we can always do it. A funny story I tell people, I'll make this quick. When I was a young project manager working for other companies, I would work on every deal, Chap. There's no deal I couldn't work on. Everything's solvable. And there's no deal that we couldn't do, we couldn't solve. And now on the opposite, I'm like, man, like 99.9% of stuff, forget it. Pass, too expensive, too hard, bad politics, bad zone. You get whatever.
All that is wisdom, Scott. You learn the
I
ones
agree.
like, that's not the best pound for pound use of my energy.
Yeah. With the optimism comes with that, like realities operations. You go, okay, like I'd love to do that. No, let's not do that. We saw that before, that kind of thing. So that would be probably one of the ones I'd say.
Yeah, I love that. And the worst thing that happens is you try to work on every project only to find that the ones that's the least profitable for you is where you spend most of your time, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, the old 80-20 deal, 80% of your projects, 80% of your time, Bernoulli's principle. Yeah.
Yes, you want the other way. Yeah, fantastic. And so let's go. Question number 3 is about philanthropy. So here at Quattro, we have 4 pillars: people, property, profit, and philanthropy. First, a group of people coming together around a property to generate profits, some of which are used for philanthropy, coming back and taking care of people. So I love to give my guests an opportunity just to share your philanthropic heart. And I would argue that your entire business plan qualifies for this question. How do you and Urban Pacific do good while doing well?
Yeah, we have several different charities that we operate in concert with, like partner with. But the one I'll share really is more like more like a value basis. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a Christian. So I really, after helping churches, I have my specific church. So things that we do really, where I try to do is always bring our skill set, my skill set, to help people accomplish what their intentions and objectives are. So I'll give an example. Some church locally here that I go to in Long Beach, Townhouse Church, they're undertaking a huge improvement program. They were able to get a new church facility, which is fantastic. And I approached them. I said, hey, let me help you. The way I describe it is, let me be a real estate developer where you aren't, right? Or that I am a real estate developer for people who can't or don't know how. And so that's obviously time and expertise and skill set donation. And there's money there too. But I'm really, I want to help solve difficult, unique problems that require like an uncommon, differentiated approach. And obviously charities and religious entities and people need help where they need help. So you have to meet them where they're at. That's primary. But I'm always looking for the intersection of those two, really an amplification of a skill set to the benefit of whoever I'm trying to help. And I really, honestly, regularly, I'm having conversations with people all the time who want to become real estate developers. And I don't consider that a philanthropy, but that's another place that I give back, that particularly young people or anyone who's, hey, Scott, I want to get in the real estate development business. Tell me how to do it. And so I probably do 2 or 3 of those calls just to help. My wife chides me about that a little bit, but can't seem to quit doing it.
Yeah. And folks, philanthropy is time, talents, and treasures. So it's not just treasures. It's giving your time and talents where it's needed to further.
Yeah, great way to say
it. I love it. Further the goodness. So last question. This one's really hard. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Question is, how do we get in touch with you, Scott? And I know you mentioned you have a wonderful newsletter that you'd like to offer to our listeners. Yeah. Where can we find that? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So where people can best get a hold of me is actually on Twitter. My handle is @Scott, SCOTT, Chopin, CHOPPIN. And I would just encourage people who are in the real estate, not just development, but investment, ownership, property management, LPGP, the real estate Twitter space, or now X or whatever the new name is going to be, is this powerful group of people, all ages, from somebody getting in brand new, fresh out of college, to people that are more I got a couple people that are senior to me in age, but the whole spectrum of real estate people in a network and environment, Chad, that I have never seen. Obviously, we go to investor conferences and real estate conferences, but this is like a 24/7 source of knowledge, information. You can ask questions. It's interactive. Yeah. So people are on Twitter, and I know social media has sort of a flavor. Oh, I like Instagram versus Twitter. But if you're in real estate and you want to learn, and you want to meet people, you got to be there. And certainly if people want to find me and connect with me and be guided on how to, develop their networks in that space, I'd be happy to help. And then the newsletter you referenced. So I write a weekly, really twice a week newsletter called The Real Signal. And the tagline is real estate plus macro. We're on Substack. So just look for The Real Signal or my name, Scott Chopin, on Substack. And so we, on a weekly basis, basically take the totality of all that we've seen the week before, articles that we're reading, things that have caught our attention, things that prompt us to think. And it's a lot of real estate, but there's other stuff. There's technology. There's more macro stuff, non-real estate oriented. We write about, but it is real estate focused. So I would encourage people to go subscribe there and put out a Saturday e-blast that's got several articles in it. And then we do a midweek that usually has a single article.
Amazing, Scott. Thank you for coming on the show today, dropping all this wisdom, dropping your unique solutions to a very real problem in this country, and just sharing your heart a little bit. So I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have another one soon. So
Great.
Stay tuned, folks. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Chad.
Want to generate higher return and drive alpha for your commercial real estate firm? Now you can with Lobby CRE by 30 Capital. Lobby CRE is an asset management platform designed to manage and optimize cash flow for faster returns and more visibility into performance. Shift your strategy with the market, not because of it. Identify opportunities and mitigate risk now rather than later, and save more than 8 hours per week through automation. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and book a demo.
All right. I hope you guys are as fired up as I am about that show. That is such an incredible story, such an incredible group that we just talked to with Scott and Urban Pacific Development. So folks, if you got any value out of this show, please like us, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, interact with the show, whatever it is you're listening to, just like it somehow or give us a review, because that is the only way to grow the show, further the influence of what comes across these airwaves. We so appreciate you for it. Folks, as a reminder, if you want to be on the show, check us out at thequattroway.com/podcast. We're on all the socials. You can find us at Real Estate Runway Podcast on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, at Team Quattro Capital, one word, no special characters, or at any of the managing partners' names, or just visit us at thequattroway.com and click on the one you want. It's all right there for you. Folks, we'd love to have a conversation with you if you're interested in partnering with us or any of our partners on future real estate investment opportunities. Check us out at thequattroway.com/invest to register and build a relationship and qualify to enter into some of our private offerings. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast, friends. Until next time, over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.